If you don't bring great energy and you don't have enthusiasm and optimism and positivity and a smile on your face, you will not pass go. Not on my interview, for sure, not on my watch, but I can tell you, not on anybody's. In my career, of the thousands of offers I've made to candidates, not one person has ever asked me for the healthcare benefits breakdown and the cost. And this is incredibly short-sighted because you could be getting a salary bump in a new company and throw it all away because the cost of your healthcare just went up.
Command the salary you deserve. That's right. Many of you will dread negotiation. Maybe you think you're greedy for asking for more money. Maybe you don't know how to do negotiation. Maybe you're worried that somebody might pull an offer out of your hands. It does happen. And that's the reason why you may not be asking for what you deserve. Stick around. We are going to have an awesome show today with KL Shaw. We'll be talking about how to get 30 to 50% more salary for you. She's been there in the HR offices on the other side of this conversation. She was the chief people officer for a company. She rose to the top of the game, sat in that seat. She's worked for some of the global brands like BMW. I am so excited to welcome KL Shaw. Welcome to the show. She is your salary negotiation ally. And we'll start there. Let me ask you, what is a salary negotiation ally?
Thank you so much for that beautiful intro. So I see myself as your agent, basically. So think about people in sports. They negotiating their deal. They have an agent to negotiate their deal. So I am more of an ally than an agent because I'm not doing the negotiation for you, but I sure as heck am loading your lips. So most people don't know what they're doing when it comes to negotiating. Most people don't negotiate for reasons that you've described. They're afraid. They don't know they can. They don't know how to. They don't know what they're worth. And they most certainly are fearful that the role might get pulled. Now, I will say I have worked and made thousands of offers to people over my career, and never once have I pulled an offer. There's only a couple reasons an offer would get pulled. And one of those reasons, if you're a jerk, so if you're not behaving nicely, or you have a big ego and you're walking in making demands, that would be a very extreme scenario. So highly not recommended, PS. Or I have heard, and this would be a very rare case where people would get their offer pulled if they didn't negotiate. So I was on a podcast with this amazing woman who is a C-suite, high-level recruiter. She was recruiting with a company for a CFO role. That CFO was made an offer. She accepted and she did not negotiate. And the company ended up rescinding the offer because at that level, they want to see how you're going to show up representing their organization. So if you think about sales roles, think about HR, think about any kind of a role where you're negotiating with vendors, we're talking big money, right? COOs, they want to see how you're going to show up. And if negotiation is awkward for you, uncomfortable for you, so they're watching that as part of the interview process. So that's just a little side tip. And hopefully gives people some confidence that you should be negotiating because it is expected.
That's awesome. And I tell every single client I work with exactly the same. If you don't negotiate, it could be a difficult start to the time in the organization. You said some wonderful things then. Did you say you put the lines on the lips? Is that what you said?
I say I load their lips.
Load the lips. So tell us a little bit about that. Like if there's a car alarm in the background, I hope that stops. But I can hear a car alarm. So what does load their lips mean? What kind of activities or tools and strategies are you going through with your clients that's helping them get ready for these negotiations?
Yeah. Well, first of all, opening the door so that they know that the person on the other end is expecting it is super, super important. And again, like I said, most people don't know that they can even ask. So for the first 2 decades of my career, I didn't realize that I could ask. So I just hoped, crossed my fingers, that the organizations I was part of were going to take care of me. And to an extent, they did, James. So I wouldn't say that I didn't feel seen and considered and that the package was right. But once I realized that I could ask, I then didn't know what to ask because we haven't normalized this conversation. We don't go to a dinner party and say, hey, James, what do you make? We don't have these conversations. And in some cases, organizations, it's very taboo. And it's even sometimes written in your handbook that you're not allowed to talk about salary. So companies that don't have salary transparency, so you're basically completely in the dark, not knowing. And so a lot of the work that we do for my clients is peeling back, number one, what is their relationship to money? Is it a scarcity mindset or an abundant mindset? Have they been burned before? Are they so afraid of asking for the greed issue that you talked about? So we want to unpack that so that you walk in with a high level of confidence. So loading their lips to have a confident win-win discussion, that's really critical. Because also keep this in mind, when you get an offer, they already want you. So this isn't like a big battle that you're walking into, like, I got to be ready to lay it down or I'm out. No, they've already said that they want you. So you're already in the driver's seat. And the goal is to create a win-win environment that is like, listen, you want me, I want you. What is it going to take for both of us to make this work? Because obviously there's more to the discussion around compensation. So we unpack that. I give them the confidence. I help them do the homework on what the role is really worth. And by the way, my company is called the Salary Bump. It goes way beyond salary. There is a long list of things that contribute to your compensation package that is far beyond the base salary. And most people don't think about all of those different elements. In fact, many of them pay for me through that because coaching is something that you can negotiate. So is PTO, so is tuition reimbursement, so is equity and bonus and car and gas and home office stipend and gym and childcare. There's a million things that people just don't get grounded to what they really value. So we spend time on that so they can walk in feeling 100% confident in having a really good discussion that feels really authentic and good for them.
I think that's so good. And you're talking on worth there. And I probably want to dive in a little bit. Yeah, I just want to support this and tell people, hey, if you're watching, if you're selected for a role and you receive an offer, it was a really important point you made. They've chosen you. So that's the moment where it's your one and only chance really to name your price. And we're going to talk. I want to talk to you a little bit about new roles and when you're in the role as well while we're on the call. But I want to talk about this worth piece because you went into kind of mindset there around money, and there's some questions and frameworks that you're helping people with. Where do you think all that comes from? Why do people not give themselves the worth that maybe they should for the kind of roles that they're going after? Because most of the time, I imagine most of the people you're working with are super talented, wonderful human beings who are really good at what they do. They're excellent at delivery. That's why they're being picked.
Limiting beliefs, you know what those are, right? Your clients know what those are. We all have things that block us from being the best version of ourselves. We all have doubts about ourselves, whether it be imposter syndrome, whether it be money doesn't grow on trees, whether it be I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not qualified enough. And it tends to be obviously individual based, but women tend to negotiate less. And part of the reason for that is they will also not apply for a job unless they hit a very large percentage of the requirements, where men might be like, oh, I can do that job, rock and roll. Let me give it a whirl. So we already kind of hold ourselves back from even putting ourselves out there. So there's a lot of things that are part of our upbringing, whether you grew up in a scarcity mindset, right? Depending on your family and your socioeconomical situation, there are things that hold us back from all aspects of our life, not just money conversations. So we want to have dialogue around that to try to break some of those things down and bring awareness. So when you are interviewing, it's not just about the negotiation, but also how you're showing up in the interview. Are you showing up with confidence when you describe your experience? Are you bringing the impact element to your experience so that it actually matters to them? Like, we got to sharpen all of those skills, because if you don't get that right, you won't even get to the negotiation. Yeah. And the one key piece that we can talk about a little bit more later is really when they ask you to tell you about themselves, they're not asking you to reiterate your resume. They want to know your talent reel. And that is your first 5 minutes of every conversation. You have to nail that or you will not connect and you won't pass go. So knowing that, and that is all about showing up with confidence, that's really what that's about.
Tell us about that job description piece, because I encounter that a lot. So let's say working with somebody who's transitioning in career or they're out of work right now and they're looking for a new role. Almost 100% of them will tell me about specific job descriptions and say, well, I can't really do everything. Is there like a recommended percentage that you would say, or is there a way that you should get somebody to look at a job description? How might you advise somebody to be thinking about the roles that they're looking at and how they're studying those roles?
Never a percentage. And I mean, look, James, titles vary from company to company. You and I both know jobs that we've had. Most of the time, I've never even seen a job description. I make it my own. Or if I've had a job description, I blow that up and I do far more than that, or take on additional responsibilities, or projects come in. And so you are constantly growing and expanding. So to tie yourself to a job description is super dangerous. A job spec that you see posted is only a fraction of what they're expecting from the role. So you can really only tie yourself to the title. And, if anything in that job spec really seems intriguing to you, and more about, I would focus more on what are the things that I do have in my toolkit that are translatable, and how can I translate those to different industry and to different areas of the business. That's the focus. I will say that the market is a little bananas right now. And so it's difficult for us to navigate more when it's a seller's market versus a buyer's market. So companies are asking for the most ridiculous things right now, and like very specific things, which is very short-sighted. Companies should be looking more around mindset and leadership and behavior and values, because if you're teachable, you're coachable. I mean, I don't know about you, but I haven't known how to do a single one of my jobs, not ever. I was thrown into every job, like, let's throw her to the wolves and see how she does. Not something highly recommended, but it's what most companies do. And I always performed and I always delivered because I'm a learner and I want to make an impact, and I will not stop until I find the answer. And that's more about grit and resilience and curiosity than it is about whether or not I was skilled at HR. I didn't know how to spell HR when I came into it. So I think a lot of that is nonsense. It's more about, do you connect with the values of the company? Like, what really matters to you? Screw the JD. It's just not that important.
Fully supportive of all of that, especially the first thing you said, which is ignore the job description, because that's not what you're going to be doing. I found that most organizations, when writing a job description, did a really half-assed job about it. It didn't look like the job at all. It didn't relate to the strategic intent of the company, and it didn't relate to the day-to-day operational activities. And yeah, I agree. I think I worked in $3 billion plus global brands. And in all of those, I didn't know anything about the industry. I didn't know anything about the role when I was going to do it. I had to kind of lead myself into it. So I think a really powerful message for people to grab that concept that KL's giving you there. Job description is really like a map. It's one way to get there, but it's probably not going to be the way that you arrive where you would like to be. You mentioned something in there about talent reel and having a 5-minute maybe pitch at the beginning of your conversation when you're answering a question, like, tell us about yourself. I'd love to kind of dive into that a little bit, that people get this first 5 minutes right. Is there a framework for that, a methodology for that? How do you get people to put together a really succinct and powerful 5-minute talent reel?
Absolutely. And it's 3 questions. So I'm giving away all my secrets for your audience, James. There's 3 questions.
You can give them the secrets. They're still going to need your help to get them implemented.
I love it. I'm just teasing. No, it is. It's so critical. And the mistake a lot of people make, remember, I have interviewed thousands of people and negotiated with thousands. The mistake they make when someone says, tell me about yourself, is they regurgitate their career. And that's actually not what they're asking you. They have your resume. They can read it. They're going to unpack with the questions about the roles and things that you've done. They want to know about you. So your talent reel is an opportunity for you to think through that red thread. What makes you you? What's your story? Because I want to know. And that story means more around things like what you value, what you're really good at, what you're innately good at with your eyes closed, hands tied behind your back. What are you just mind-blowingly good at? And what do you really love? Like, what is really important to you? And then how are you, or do you want to make an impact on the world? So the three questions are, what do you love? What are you good at? How do you want to make an impact on the world? And I'll tell you this story because I think it's a really powerful one. My daughter is 21 years old and was looking for an internship for this summer. She and I talked about talent reel. She's like, oh, what's a talent reel? Mom, I've just been, a server at a restaurant or a bartender or whatever. She's like, I don't have experience to go work in a corporation. So I said, well, then let's talk about what you really love. She's like, Mom, at the time she was living in London, studying abroad. She said, Mom, I love to travel. I love it so much. Like, it just is mind blowing to me. And so we are an international family. So she's been around languages and people are coming in and going, and just we've traveled with her around the world. So she loves to travel. Okay, great. So taking international business is very smart of you. What else I love is culture. I love going to a country and immersing myself and understanding in the language and just seeing like how the different dynamics. Like, okay, cool. What are you good at? Well, I'm really good with customers. I love creating a really awesome customer experience. So from being a server, like, I want my clients to feel really amazing when they're around me and when they've left. Like, okay, super. How do you want to make an impact on the world? Well, we talked a little bit about she's been an underdog in every environment of her life because she went to 6 different schools before she graduated high school. We lived in different countries and it was really hard. But it taught me about looking around a room and seeing the person who's sitting in the corner and making sure that they're included. And so I want to make an impact that way. So we co-created her elevator pitch was, well, I grew up in an international family. I carry 3 passports, and travel and culture are the things that really fuel me. And I've been to 6 different schools before I graduated high school, and it taught me about being an underdog, and it taught me about how I integrate and about resilience and curiosity and how I bring that in new environments. While I was frustrated growing up, I'm sure there was some hatred towards my parents. I actually thrive now in that environment, and I recognize how that taught me and how I show up today. James, that's a pretty powerful pitch, if I do say so myself. I mean, maybe I'm a little biased because I helped her create it and she's my daughter, but it was a beautiful example of someone who didn't have a lot of experience. And when she talked about her experience, it was, I'm a server. No, your experience is in hospitality, my love. Oh, yeah, that sounds different. So, by the way, she got the job offer for the job that she applied for, one of the most globally recognized brands in the world. I'm not going to drop the name, but could not be more proud of what she accomplished. And I'm certain that that was part of why she passed go.
Yeah, I think having a framework as simple as that just allows the individual, irrespective of it's your daughter or anybody else you work with, or anybody watching this video, for you to be authentic about how you're connected to what is required in the role. And I think most people miss that they're inauthentic because they put a mask on and tell a story that they think the interviewer wants to hear. And I just think that's magical because this cuts through that and allows you just to connect to who you're talking to. Yeah, I enjoyed interview processes, but I always imagine people on the other side of my questions were probably thinking, this is brutal. But it's because I really wanted to get to know the human. So I would be asking very probing questions about who they were and what makes them tick and what brings them alive. And because they frequently didn't tell me. I think about career conversations as a 3-pronged attack. As they're going to ask you, can you do the job? And your 3 framework is that 5-minute talent reel of, I can do the job. You answer that question. And there's 2 other areas that I like is, one is, why do you want to work here? And so perhaps I'll ask you about that is, what people should be doing when they answer that question. Why do you want to join this company? I think that'd be a good thing to go into. Yeah. And then the other one is, what attitude and energy stood out to you from all those conversations you had when you made offers and you hired people? What were the things that you were looking for? I think these are really good tips for people to pick up on. So perhaps a two-part question. How does someone answer that? Why do you want the job? And then what tips might you give for the attitude and energy that they bring to the conversation?
So if you don't bring great energy and you don't have enthusiasm and optimism and positivity and a smile on your face, you will not pass go. Not on my interview, for sure, not on my watch, but I can tell you, not on anybody's, because I'm interviewing hundreds of people every day, and it's a wah sometimes, and the duds don't move forward. Because if you can't find a way to connect with me through the video, give me something. When you talk about your talent reel, it isn't about your work. It's about who you are, what you bring, and how that then can be of value inside your organization. If the company is wah-wah, then your high energy won't be a match. But you want to think about passing go to then get to the really meaty questions, which are, okay, let's talk about how you execute or how you handle certain situations. Energy, attitude, most important. Those would be my two very, very biggest tips.
Yeah. And why somebody might want the job? What would they say to the interviewer? So if I'm being interviewed by you, what are you looking out for from me to express that this is the place I want to work?
You have to do your homework first and foremost. So if you haven't done your research on the organization, shame. Not everybody will ask that question, but you need to. Like, you are in the driver's seat as much as you don't believe it, as much as you think it's the company that holds all the strings. No, you're actually in the driver's seat, and you are interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you. So do your homework. Find out what makes them tick. If you can figure out what they value, look for them in the news. Look on Glassdoor. Find out what their employees are saying. If you know anyone in your network that works there, can you give me some indication of what it feels like working here? Those are the important factors. And then have a really good answer. Well, I did some homework on you guys. And, I'm really intrigued in your area of sustainability or But I did go on Glassdoor and I did notice some reviews that weren't as positive. And I'd love to unpack that and understand how I can help you make an impact to improve it. All of these things are very real conversations. And if you're not having a real conversation now, even if you get the job, you will not be happy. I'm going to throw one last thing in there. And when I say you're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you, I have anyone can DM me in LinkedIn and I'll send it over to you. I have a freebie that I send to people that is my top interview questions for you as a candidate to ask an interviewer, and pepper those throughout the conversation. Don't just wait for them to ask you questions, because if you're asked, do you have any questions for me? The amount of people that say no is alarming. Yeah. And frankly, there are a lot of people that won't hire you because you didn't ask any questions. So knowing when to ask them and knowing what you value is really important, so you can ask those throughout the process.
I tell every executive I'm working with, if you don't have 30 questions on a paper walking in, you don't have enough questions. You have to go through every alleyway. People I'm talking with are kind of C-suite executives, senior vice presidents, and to them it's a shock. 30 questions? I'm like, yeah, because you're going to forget. And then the CEO will say to you when they don't hire you, you missed out this one question. And for me, that was the important one. I think that's really good. Now, you mentioned there free resources from you. And I think that's important. So in the show notes, everybody, and we're going to stick around to the end because we'll give you more access and other things that you can kind of take a look at. The web link is down there. The LinkedIn is down there. So you can get in touch with KR. So there's direct contact here for somebody to support you today. So you don't need to wait. As soon as you've seen this video, go down there and check it out. And then at the end, we'll talk a little bit more about your course and your program and how you help people, a little bit more specificity. Two other areas I really want to kind of explore. Well, we've got you, because I know we're running against the clock here. What about the checklist you talked about? So you were talking about, don't just negotiate on basic pay. And then you listed PTO, bonuses, equity, and all these other things. I would love... Is there like a minimum benchmark? Or if you've got it all in your head, tell us what, I want people to write this down, and maybe we'll put this in the show notes, a little checklist. These are all the things, because I want people to have immediate, actionable information. What are the things, because you said childcare, and I think that's a beautiful one, because not every small company would offer that. but some large companies do, or at least a reimbursement. So tell us a little bit about all the things that you'd say, these are negotiable, all these things.
If you're asking me to share the cheat sheet to put in the show notes, I might just do that, James. Let's see. Happy to share that with your audience. But what I will say is when we are prepping for the negotiation, we are grounding ourselves to what your exact current package is. So I have a cheat sheet that lists on one column your entire package, every single element of it, including RSUs and equity and bonus and any other payments that you get. We want to list those out. And then when you get the offer, we want to match that side by side so you haven't left anything on the table. So there's a couple of reasons why we do this. One, you don't want to leave anything on the table. And two, you want to know all the things that you have to be able to negotiate. Now, there's obviously the right way to present this and not just like, well, let me get out my list and let's go through line by line. Well, we didn't talk about this yet. No, that's not how you navigate the negotiation. So you have to be really thoughtful about when to insert these things. But it is really important. And I'll tell you, in my career, of the thousands of offers I've made to candidates, not one person has ever asked me for the healthcare benefits breakdown and the cost. And this is incredibly short-sighted because you could be getting a salary bump in a new company and throw it all away because the cost of your healthcare just went up. This is, again, more specific to the US because it's all over the place. In a more socialized country, European countries, you're supported by the government in different ways. So it's a little different in the US market, but something to be incredibly considerate of. And not to mention, there are, depending on what stage of life you're in, there might be things that matter to you more. Mm-hmm. Maybe fertility benefits are something that are more important to you, and your current company offers them and this company doesn't. You're like, well, that's $200,000 I'm leaving on the table, so I'm not going to leave my company right now. So really important for us to get grounded on what matters to you. So whether it is childcare, for some it might not be. Well, then that's not something we're negotiating. Maybe it's tuition reimbursement because I want to get my MBA. The list is lengthy, and there's a couple of things on that list that a lot of people don't think about. I'm going to give you 3 of them. One is professional development and coaching, so they can pay for you and I very easily. One is a sign-on bonus, which a lot of people don't think about. And the other is severance. So for your clients, James, and I would say director level and above, this is highly recommended that you also negotiate severance in your contract. 3 months minimum at director level and 6 months and above for VP and higher is what I recommend, because it's a volatile market. You're not in the driver's seat. In the US, you're an at-will employee. They can fire you at any time. And so to have that in your contract, which a lot of European countries have already anyway, they have those protection mechanisms. Those are 3 things that I would absolutely consider to have in your toolkit. But then we customize it.
It's absolutely awesome. Yes, yes, yes. I tell every executive, you need a severance package or a parachute payment in case anything untoward happens out of your control. And luckily, we've been able to execute on those things and people get paid for them. But the freedom and the breath of fresh air it brings when, so bad news come and there is a reduction in force, that person is protected and they can go back to the family and say, well, good news. James helped me negotiate the back end here, so I'm good. And now I've got a period of time, 3 to 6 months, to go and find myself a new home. It's so good. Yeah. And so I think, here's an idea. Why don't we incentivize people to jump on a call with you? And if they go on the call, the free gift you're going to give them is the full checklist. Does that sound like a good deal?
That sounds like a great deal. And every discovery call is complimentary. And we just discuss your situation and whether or not you think it even makes sense. Because I do also say, James, look, it's the same as you, right? Not every client is a match. And they need to feel like, oh, wow, like I think this could be really something for me. Sounds like a perfect deal.
Awesome. Since we've been talking, one of my good friends is somebody who I think we could probably do a triangle with, because they do pre-interview stuff, like before the job market, has become something of opening. And then you're doing the in process, get the salary negotiation right. And I'm doing that. You're in the role. Let's maximize your potential and figure out how you can navigate the different things and transition or transform yourself. So I think there's a really good need to plug us all in. Let's go. We've got a little while. So let's go to, this has been a lot about interviews and going into role. What about people who are already in role, who've missed this, or they negotiated some of these things? How do they navigate when they're actually inside the company and they're like, well, I'm being told that I've been leveled and I'm compared to the market, everything's exactly as it should be. But what are your thoughts on that? Again, I think you have got such a great insight here to be able to tell people what to do when they're in the company.
So love this question. And actually, I didn't really talk about my story, but I'm going to go there. So there's twice in my career, I managed to double my salary. Once when I job jumped, which by the way, if you job jump, you make about 55% more over your career. And once when I was
Just
in a
pause on
role.
that. Did you hear what KL just said? 55% more money in your career. Go and get an Excel sheet or a Google sheet and write down all the money you've earned so far and times it by 1.55 to see what you've left on the table, especially if you were somebody who stayed in an organization for more than 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
I
And
think
I'll
that's
just
such a
tell you,
powerful concept. Yeah.
James, it's alarming. And actually that number has been vetted out by Forbes. It's between 1 million and 1.5 million is what each of us are leaving on the table.
Ooh.
And that's a very real number. And obviously there's compounding interest. There's all sorts of stuff that you're just not considering.
I interrupted. Tell us your story of double pay. So the first one was the jump, and then what was the second one?
Yeah. And the second one was in an existing role. So in HR, I have the advantage of seeing everyone's salary. And one of the very first things I always do is an equity analysis when I take over a new role. I want to make sure that we are paying people appropriately, all levels, with every factor that you can slice and dice. So this is important, really, really important. Every company should be doing this on a regular basis, by the way, not just when you take over a new role. But with that said, we were building out an equity program for the executives in the company. And of course, when I did the analysis, my name was at the bottom of the list. And my CEO was mortified, didn't realize that they didn't do a benchmark analysis before they brought me in. I was the only female board member. And this was all executives, not just board members. So I was really low, partly my fault for not negotiating enough and their fault for not benchmarking me. Long story short, once he saw it, he was like, Kale, we'll fix this. I'm like, no worries. When we get the equity plan put together, we'll make it right. I wasn't worried. I knew I would get there. I knew it would prove it to him. Then the pandemic hit and money was tight. So I'm like, all right, well, that's not going to happen in the short term, but let's just do my thing. And my role obviously was really elevated as a chief people officer. I was hand in hand with the CEO. We were partners in crime. Was some of the best work I've ever done, some of the most challenging work I've ever done. And by 6 months into the pandemic, I was incredibly frustrated. And I said, I am doing more than any of the other executives on the team. And I need to talk to my CEO. So I put together a communication blueprint that I got from the London Business School. And it's what I share with my clients. And I got 3 sentences out and he doubled my salary on the spot, which at that point I was making 150,000 more than the CFO, which as a CPO, if anyone is a chief HR officer listening, that is unheard of. And those 2 moments in my life were part of the reason why I created this company. And the fact that I'm incredibly passionate about closing the gender pay gap. And I know that less than 50% of people are negotiating. And this is just, it's a crime. And I want to change that and do my part. So getting a bump in your existing role is very different than getting a bump when you're negotiating a new role. It requires a little more patience. It requires an absolute communication blueprint. It requires timing and being absolutely certain that you're catching your boss at that time of the day where he or she is really in that groove. Like I used to have a boss who was like a vampire. He would be in his office in the dark every night. And that was the only time I could ever catch him to talk about the day and the things I needed with him. And that was where we did some of the most magical work, oddly, in the dark. But if I ever wanted to talk to him about anything important, such as an increase or my career, that was my opportunity. And that was when I knew I had the most of his attention. Others, another boss, he was a 4 a.m. guy. So if I wanted to catch his attention, it was over his coffee at 5 a.m. over Zoom. There's so much to unpack around getting a bump in your existing role. We still do that checklist to also understand what you really value. Or you say, like, you don't have tuition reimbursement, but I really want to get my MBA. Let's get your MBA paid for, man. Like, that's not hard. We can do that. Yep. Or I have had also, James, many of my clients want to hire me and we craft a story to go to their boss and about getting personal development and coaching, and they pay for me that way. So there's a lot of ways to do that. It's not as challenging as people might think. It just requires a lot of thought and timing and patience.
Yeah, I think being creative and owning your story and your journey is important. And you're letting people know if you're frustrated and you're dissatisfied with where you're at, that there is another way. And watching this video, especially if you're still watching and you've been here since the beginning, I think you owe it to yourself to indulge yourself with a free call, complimentary with KL, to sit down and go through your situation. And that's no obligation on you. And we've already talked about giving you some free assets. So that's so good. Yeah. I do want to ask you a kind of side question, and not really because I know you've got a private client practice, but you talked about that equity analysis. Is that a service that you provide to businesses as well, that you could go in and do that work on their behalf?
Oh, what a segue, James. I don't even think we talked about this prior. So I do fractional HR work. So I will go into organizations, help them with whatever it is that they think is getting in their way. We then, obviously, once we lift the hood, a whole bunch of stuff flies out, and we end up doing even more than what they think they need. And then we have coaching associated with that as well. I'm not proactively out there doing that. It's through my network that old CEOs and execs will call me and say, hey, can you come in and help us with this? One of the things I'm building out, and just in the process of figuring out how to scale it, is to come into organizations to help them understand the aspect around pay transparency and transparency in general, that if you can share with employees more transparency around the structure of how you're paying your employees, of the market research that you're doing to pay your employees, and help them see that they have a future inside the organization from a career mapping standpoint, as well as their financial future, and even helping them understand what our benefits are worth and why we put so much emphasis on that. And here's what it would cost you if you didn't have working on building 4 companies from a scalable standpoint. In the meantime, I do it by coming in and helping you one-on-one. But I know there's something important here around retention. And most companies are not thinking about that. Most companies are not paying enough attention to their turnover rates and what that's costing them, which is about 33% on your average salary. Yep. So calculate that bad boy. That is in the multi-millions of dollars, no matter what size your company is. And there's a real opportunity to create employee engagement around transparency. So yeah, I'm working on it.
If you are a C-suite executive and you're looking for somebody to come in and help your HR team out, I think you just found somebody to have a conversation with. That's good. The summary of that. All right, let's transition to a bit more about what you do. But before we go there, kind of lead us into this, the importance of teams, relationships, partners. Say a little bit about that and your experiences of climbing through your career ladder up to the chief people officer seat. How important was it that you had a team around you? How important did you build the right relationships? I just want to get your perspective. And then after that, we'll dive into coaching and talking about the role of coaching and mentorship.
Yeah. So I think one of the mistakes that a lot of people make is they don't foster their network. I highly recommend that you foster an internal network. That's fairly obvious. Your external network is equally as important, because when the job market is the way it is today, you get lucky, but it's a needle in a haystack. And I would rather control the controllables. And the way that I can do that is by fostering my network and nurturing that network. I managed to do that inside every organization I ever worked very well and sort of innately. And once a year, I would send them a gratitude note, usually around Thanksgiving, thanking them for just their support of me. And that was just something I did because I wanted to share my gratitude. That went so far in my promotions throughout my career inside companies, but I made the mistake of not fostering more of an external network. I did not have time to attend events. I did not give myself the time to attend events. So networking, start now, don't sleep on it, and don't assume that everyone is too busy, because that would be the first thing they would say to me in my HR role. Oh, I know you're so busy. Oh, I'm so sorry. They would apologize. So I wouldn't have accepted the meeting if I didn't want to. So stop apologizing, friends. Like, it is an opportunity that leaders at that level are also required to give back, because somebody helped them along the way in their career. So it's hugely important that you foster and nurture and show gratitude. because the amount of things that I do for people still to this day, and they don't say thank you, it's alarming. It's actually really, really alarming. And a thank you goes much further than you will ever realize.
Yeah, I learned the power of thank you notes from a female manager who was my boss, and she was the president of the business, constantly walking around the office with thank you cards to thank people for the effort they were putting in, for the time that they'd engaged away from their families, or on projects where it was feast and famine. Sometimes we'd be quiet and there was time for water cooler chat. Other times everybody was in the office till late hours, and it was difficult and it was awkward, but there were client needs and moments to dig in and roll your sleeves up. And I said, just so good. And I used that in all of my executive roles afterwards. I think it's just such a powerful concept. Yeah. And on the network, yeah, I want to support what you said. I think I messaged maybe 10 people on LinkedIn this morning 5 months ago. 5 months ago, they didn't reply. I never take that as a they don't want to talk to me. I just take it as, in this season, they are not able to talk to me because they're in that position of being underwater. Every single one of them replied to me today. Yeah, let's hop on a call. Let's do that. And it's just that fostering, I think, is so important that even if you feel like, well, they haven't spoken to me in 6 months, it doesn't matter. Now is the time, and let the universe guide you a little bit on people who pop into your head. When you hear their names, there's a reason. Go and reach out to them and figure out how you can sit down. And the last thing you said, which I think was so powerful, is the executives inside companies don't network with other executives. They do in some companies, but it's pretty rare. I'm working with people who are VP tier who don't know their leadership, don't hang out with the C-suite. You got to hang out with the C-suite. Go and do that. I want to ask you, and if you don't have the number, it's okay. Maybe have a guess, but you probably do know the number. Let's say for every $1 or $100 that somebody gives you, what would the return on investment look like from the negotiation? Because your promise is 30 to 50%. That's kind of your band, right? That's what the salary negotiation bump is going to be for you. So what would be the return on investment? That's kind of, if I give you $1, how many give me? Or because you're working with higher network folks, probably if I pay you $100, how many dollars am I going to get back, do you think? Is there an average for that?
Yeah, 140, 40% if we go somewhere
40%?
in between. Okay. It's significant.
Isn't the number bigger? Because surely they get 40% immediately, and then every
immediately.
year.
Yeah, I haven't done the calculation. James, are you asking me to do math? You did not. Did you know that math is not my strong suit? Oh, come on,
I want this to come across to anybody watching that this is a no-brainer. You can have a complimentary phone call, then you can take a choice of paid services or no paid services. So we're not forcing you to do anything, but we're saying to you, hey, if you're willing to put $100 on a table and somebody's going to give you 40 and the 100 back, wouldn't you think about that? Seriously, I mean, that's a no-brainer to me.
Yeah. Well, compounded, I guess, what the average rate right now of return is about 6% on the markets, right? So if you were to invest that, it is significant. And I think what a lot of people underestimate, you and I are coaches, right? We also hire coaches for ourselves. So even coaches hire coaches. And some of the best gifts that I was ever given or asked for and negotiated was when I had a coach sitting in the passenger seat next to me. So I myself hired 4 coaches this year. I went all in on me, and that was not a cheap date, but I can tell you what that has done for me is so transformational. So I hired a personal coach to get out of my own way, to see the spinach in my teeth, to hold the mirror up, and to actually really help me hone in on being the best version of myself. That was number 1. Hard work, by the way, but incredibly powerful. It's made me a better person, partner, mom, friend. And I hired a business coach because I wanted to expand my business and think about maybe where I was maybe keeping myself small and how I could really think about how I can make a bigger impact on the world. Unbelievably powerful. And I hired a trauma coach from a trauma from 18 years ago that I would like to unpack and stop carrying this backpack. And whether we have a serious trauma or whether we have something that's impacted us, call it what you wish. We all have some kind of backpack that we're carrying. That is probably one of the most transformational things. And then I hired a naturopath to help me with my overall health and understand what this process of menopause is that I'm going through, which a lot of women go through. No one talks about, nobody has answers to set me on the right path. And that has been in itself incredibly transformational. And unfortunately, our healthcare doesn't cover it. So it was a very large out-of-pocket investment that I know will pay dividends because I will no longer be exhausted. I will no longer be barely keeping my eyes open throughout the day, where I am not bringing my highest energy, which means I can't give the best of me, where I like literally on Friday at the end of the day cannot even speak anymore because I'm exhausted and I need the weekend to recharge so I can be the best for my clients. I 100%, I cannot say enough about the investment in you and how that pays dividends. And it really is. My favorite clients are the ones who are all in on themselves, because that's where the magic really, or the rubber hits the road.
Yeah, and we talked a few weeks ago about, I believe you need a physical coach, which you've got. You need a mental health coach, a therapist, you've got. Yeah. You need a business, career, life coach, which you've got. So you've invested in those areas. And I do think it's more than time and attention. It's got to be some capital. If you take a look at the Olympics right now, every gold medalist, when they come over to speak to Lewis on the track, the guy on the NBC recovery, the first question he says, how did you go? And then they just say, well, first, I just want to thank my team. And the team isn't 4 coaches. It's like 20 people, because it's the family, the friends, the spouse, and everybody else who's looking after the things we just talked about. And I think it's so, so important. So thank you for sharing that. I'm going to ask you a couple more things. We're going to do a cross-country drive, and we're going to set off from New York, and our destination is San Diego. You are in the passenger seat. Which 3 notable people, alive or dead, if you like, who's driving, and who are the 2 in the back that go with you?
Wow,
it's important, because these 3 people,
it is such an important question.
So going to be a connection to the people who need to come and talk to you.
I would say I've got some really incredible people in my life. So if I'm choosing the people in my life that are going to make this an incredible trip, there's 3 people that come to mind. Whether or not I'm in the passenger seat, because I've spent 20 years in automotive, James, and I ride a Harley. So I may or may not be in the driver's seat. And I have a lot of really dorky car references. But my friend Ricky, who's one of the funniest people I know, she would be in the passenger seat, and 2 besties from Canada who just bring me so much joy. And unfortunately, there's more. My bestie from Nashville, like, can I have more than 3 people?
All right. Well, no, it's good. The answer is your best friends are coming. And I think people need to hear that you're all about that connection, close-knit community of people you trust, you would share anything with, and more importantly, sit in a car with for over 20 hours. That's a commitment of energy into their lives as well. All right, let's wrap this up. We are a little bit over time, so I just want to figure out, how is the best way for people to come out? We've got your website, we've got your LinkedIn, but where do you want people to connect with you first?
LinkedIn is the most beautiful platform, biggest shock to me, the most friendly, unbelievable platform where you can learn and listen and share and engage. I'm very, very personal on LinkedIn. I share a lot of personal stories, a lot of free tips. And I'm very engaged with my DMs, and it's all me. And I love every minute of those engagements. So pop over there. I'm on TikTok and I'm on Instagram. That's a totally different dynamic. Sometimes I share between platforms, but LinkedIn is it. I think it's the most interesting place. So yeah, that's where you can find me the most.
Well, I just want to say thank you for your time and energy and for all the share today, because I know anybody watches this is going to take a ton of information to think about how they implement their negotiation strategy that's going to get them 30 to 50% more income. Thank you. And we'll say goodbye to everybody.
Thank you, James.
I just want to let you know that if you like this video, then there will be another video that you can go to right now and click in and learn a little bit more about how you can manage your career, how you can think about retirement, or how you can just manage your leadership and think about how you can make a bigger impact in this world. So I'll see you right there in this video.